It's been a minute since we've done a tier list, and I have been reading quite a few dystopian novels in the past few weeks, so I figured let's go ahead and set out my personal dystopian novel tier list from a list of, I think, 14 novels that I have read that I think deserve to be in some form on a national registry about dystopian novels. So let us begin, as we should, with the granddaddy of them all. Although not the oldest on this list, I think the novel that when you say the word dystopia, this pops into, I would say, 99% of people's heads, and that is 1984. If you watched my classic tier list, you know how I feel about 1984. You know how important I think that it is. You know its cultural impact, you know its literary impact, the fact that all dystopian novels after it kind of borrow from it or downright steal from it or in some way, shape, or form make reference to it, in my opinion. Although it is not the oldest, I believe Brave New World was written before 1984. Like I said, 1984 sets the standard. It is dystopia. It is surveillance state. It is everything that you think of. So I would say if you still have not read this, and I know that in the modern, 2025 world in which we live in, it may be trite or it may be, looked down upon or kind of passé to say that 1984 is an important book because it has so embedded itself in our culture that it can sometimes feel like overdone. When you talk about David Foster Wallace, it's the same type of thing. Everybody knows how great of a writer David Foster Wallace was. So to have him as your favorite author is kind of like, yeah, whatever. You're just trying to be a poser or put on airs. So if you say something about the brilliance of 1984, it can feel that same way. But I will say it is still incredibly impactful. It is still incredibly important. Go ahead and read it. Next up, we have Animal Farm, also by Orwell. Also a great novel in its own right. But for me personally, the restriction of its scope more so to, language, more so to the ability of a government entity to kind of set the narrative. It doesn't have the same broad sweeping power that I feel like 1984 has. It doesn't have the same level of humanity, obviously because it is about animals, and it is an incredibly well done allegory about humanity through the lens of farm animals, which I think is very interesting and very fun at times. It's kind of more sickly humorous than 1984 is, which I think you can get a lot out of. Maybe it's an A for me. I'll put it at B right now to kind of set a little bit of a standard. Again, another one that I think you should read. This one's a little bit shorter than 1984, a lot more heavy-handed is the wrong way to put it. Easier understood. I think that the themes and the messaging that Orwell is trying to get across in this book come across at a lot more of a surface level than 1984. So if you are younger, if you are just entering into your phase of, literary criticism, you could go into Animal Farm and try and understand it a little bit more and then engage with 1984 maybe a little bit later. I don't know, just my perspective. Next up is Battle Royale. I really liked this book the first time I read it. It, for me, is, kind of a spoiler alert. It is the better Hunger Games. It is more, that same type of student, being thrust into a battle arena and having to fight through their, fight for their lives. So very much Hunger Games. Japanese, obviously, personal preference, I'm going to choose the Japanese property over the English property 9 times out of 10. That's just where my sensibilities lie. I think as I've aged a little bit more, the student aspect of it has kind of not lost its luster, but I'm not so much interested in student stories anymore. I'm a 30-year-old man. I can still see the power and the impact that is played out throughout this novel, and I think it's still very important, but I would put it solidly on B. Next up is Blindness. My wife is really going to hate me for putting this at a C because I think she really got a lot more out of this than I did. I think for whatever reason, there's something that seems a little bit lost in translation, or at least that's how I feel when I'm reading this book. I didn't get as much out of this as she did, as others did. This is a story about, a pandemic type of experience, a blindness that starts to take over the world. Very interesting premise that I felt didn't really deliver. We spend a lot of our times in an internment camp with people who are being affected by this blindness. Spoiler alert, I guess, for this novel, there's one person who is not affected by this blindness. And so we have to kind of learn how they navigate the new world in which they live. How they pretend that they are blind so that they are not swept up in some, sweeping kind of government intervention or program, or maybe experimentation to learn why they are not stricken with the blindness. There's so many good elements to a story and a novel. And there's a great, I guess kind of Lord of the Flies aspect to being in the internment camp, how human behavior devolves. But for me, maybe because it is a translated book and I didn't read it in its original language, something just was missing. It didn't have that same level of impact that 1984 did, or even Animal Farm did for me. So I'll leave it in C for now. It's very well written. The premise is good. I think my expectations maybe were a little bit higher for this book, and that's why my reaction to it is a little bit lower than maybe it should be. But there you go. Brave New World, I'm going to put an A. Fantastic. Again, when we're talking about the grandparents of this genre that has been beaten to death in recent years, you have to talk about Brave New World. It was the one that I think came before. I don't know of any that were kind of written before. Maybe I don't know all books at all times, people. I'm not the oracle, but I think it was 1931 or 32 when this was written. So in between two major world wars, obviously Aldous Huxley didn't know that there was going to be another world war, but, coming off of the Great War and the upheaval of European society, of global society, I think that you can kind of look at these dystopian texts and see the major world events that influence them. I mean, obviously 1984 was written, I believe, in 49, coming off of one of the most significant events in human history. So you can kind of plot out where people get their inspiration. And I think that this was written at a time post World War I, post massive economic collapse, global collapse. I think you can really see a lot of that in there. Next up is Clockwork Orange. I think this is a solid book. The thing about Clockwork Orange for me is I feel that the movie is better. I mean, I wanted to say that a little bit more diplomatically, but oftentimes I fall into the camp of adaptations being worse, but for whatever reason, maybe it's just my sensibilities, I feel like the ultra-violence of this text plays better in a visual medium. So as much as I enjoyed this story and this novel, I think that the incredible visuals work so much better and have more of an impact when you're seeing them play out. I mean, the moments of ultraviolence on screen, the moments of reprogramming displayed on screen with Anthony Hopkins. Is it Anthony Hopkins? I don't even remember. The main character having his eyes pinned open and having to watch the reprogramming. It's more visceral. It evokes more feeling on screen. It didn't really evoke that same feeling when I was reading it. Next up, Fahrenheit 451. That's got to be another S tier for me. I would say that this is obviously second only to 1984 for me personally. The story here, the importance of literature, the irony of language, the firefighters, the firemen being people who are actually burning books rather than putting out fires. I love when a story or a piece of literature can take something that is so core to our societies, firemen, firefighters, and flip it completely on its head in a way that we immediately understand how this would have happened, why this happened, and the irony of that word being applied to these people who are doing the thing that is exactly the opposite of what they're doing in our society is just chef's kiss, perfection. Next up, we have The Handmaid's Tale. I have to give this a C. I did a recent review of this in a wrap-up video where I just felt so incredibly underwhelmed. Maybe because this has become so overhyped and in our popular culture with the TV show and with the reprint of the book, it has just entered the zeitgeist, and it is talked about and discussed and iterated on. I read it and I thought to myself, this cannot be what everyone is freaking out about. This cannot be it. There has to be something more. I felt personally it just was poorly written. The writing did not speak to me. The messaging is obviously incredibly important, as with all of these books. All of these dystopian novels obviously have something to say, but I feel like the packaging in which this was presented was not very good. So I will put it in C. Clearly, Blindness is better, so I will keep it at the bottom of the list right now. Hunger Games. This is going to be a very interesting discussion. This is a B. Now, we have to frame this in the way that it needs to be framed. This is a global phenomenon. I mean, you can see with Ballads of Songbirds or whatever the newest one that has just come out. This is a global phenomenon. The literature and the quality of this book itself is clearly not as good as even The Handmaid's Tale, I would say, is better written. This is a YA dystopian novel. But the reason that I have it here on this list and at a B is because of its introduction of a new generation to these ideas and these concepts, these authoritarian governments, the idea of, battle royales, the idea of, sacrificing population control, and just the ability that these questions that were being asked, I think more in the 60s and 70s about, well, what do we do with resource management? And what do we do if the population starts to become unruly or starts to rise up against us? How do we control them? How do we entertain them? Drawing on Roman gladiator battles to entertain the masses. It has really mature themes woven throughout, but it became this, Jennifer Lawrence vehicle and heartthrobs for, teen girls to go be PETA or Team Gale or whatever the hell it was. So it can be looked at in a way that is, tacky. But I do think that the novel itself, the first one specifically, had a level of sophistication for a YA piece of fiction that I think stands the test of time. Now, you can say that as it became franchised and the huge star maker that it became, it lost some of its luster. Obviously, it did. It became a commercial entity, and a lot of these dystopian novels are kind of fighting against commercial entities and capitalism and just the commodification of these ideas. So I don't want to talk about this as a perspective of the entire series or film series or whatever, but this book specifically I think deserves its place on this list, and I will give it a B. Next up is Surveillance, which I actually haven't read. It is on my list. I don't know how it made it, I guess, on my list. I put it in this tier list, but I haven't read this. I have heard great things about it, so I'm excited to give this a read. Next up, we have Children of Men, which I'm going to put in D. I have read this. This is another, the movie adaptation of this, when I tell you, blows this book out of the water. This book is important. It has some interesting things to say. I did not like the way that it was saying them. I think that there was too much focus on superfluous detail. If you have, some time, it's not a very long book, if I remember correctly, give it a read and then watch the movie. And you will say to yourself, why didn't the author take this story in the direction that the movie takes it? The movie is so incredible. And this may be my film sensibilities coming out a little bit more so here, but when you live in a world where the movie exists and the book exists, it's hard to then divorce the two and say the book doesn't live on its own. And if it did, I think you could look at it and say, well, this was just fine. But because we also have the movie and we have something to compare it to, it gets knocked down a peg for me. And that's why it's in D. The Giver, I'm going to give a solid B. This was a very recent read. I think I just finished this a couple days ago. I think if I had read this when I was 14, this would have been more impactful and more of a, seminal piece of work in my life. But as an adult reading it and having this much history behind all of the, dystopian novels that I've read so far, it was impactful. It wasn't as impactful as a lot of these other books. And I think it's, I probably would put it above The Hunger Games just for personal preference, but I honestly would have liked a little bit more out of it. I usually don't ask for more or longer books. I think that a lot of books that are published in today's economy are way too long, but this felt underwritten. This felt like we needed a couple more pages in the dystopian society. We needed a couple more pages of change after the protagonist breaks free of the dystopian society. So that's just where I'm at. The Road, actually, I'm going to put this as in an A. The reason I'm hesitating here is Cormac McCarthy is so singular in their style that you either love it or you hate it. And for me, it speaks to me. I like the writing style a lot, but I was thinking about putting it in a B just for the fact that I know a ton of people really do not vibe with the sparsity of the writing here. And the other thing too is the movie adaptation of this does not work very much at all, but the book version of this is fantastic. And if you were only going to read one Cormac McCarthy, I don't know, maybe I would say All the Pretty Horses, but I do think The Road is right up there with the setting. I think that this is one that captures the setting maybe better than the messaging that it's trying to come across, because I don't think Cormac McCarthy is really writing to get across a message. I think their talents lie more so in setting and place and tone, and this jumps off the page. The disparity, I'm making up words this whole, I don't know, the depravity of the world in which, oh my goodness, the depravity in which the world where this takes place is just, unmatched in terms of tone and just maintaining a tone throughout the text. Finally, we have Oh, I haven't read this one either. This is another that needs to be read. So I have two on here that I haven't read yet, Surveillance and We, that I'm excited to read. But so this is my list. You can agree, you can disagree. Please let me know what you think down in the comments. Are you tired of dystopian fiction? Are you trying to disconnect from dystopian fiction? Something, I like my reading with a little bit of sadness. I like my reading with a little bit of hopelessness, because I'm in a fortunate position where my life is not that hopeless. I'm enjoying being a father. I'm enjoying my life. So I like to engage in other stories that are a little bit more negative or a little bit more dour. But I totally understand if you are trying to find more escapism in your reading. But if you have read a lot of these books, please let me know what you thought. I love doing these tier lists. If you have ideas for more tier lists, let me know. I'll whip them up. That's all I've got for you. I hope you're reading something very good, something very entertaining, or something very meaningful. I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.